The shower room beneath the training complex was never meant to be quiet. It was built to echo, water hammering down from steel pipes, boots scraping concrete, voices barking orders even when the day was officially done. Tonight, however, the noise felt different. The steam hung thick and heavy, clinging to the ceiling like a held breath. She stood beneath the spray, eyes closed, letting the cold water run down her shoulders. The day's grit, dust from the obstacle course, chalk from the climbing wall, the sharp metallic smell of the range, washed away in rivulets. She had chosen this hour on purpose, late, when most of the base slept. When rank didn't matter because no one was supposed to be there, the door clanged open, bootsteps too many, too loud, cut through the steady rush of water. She didn't flinch, not yet. Experience had taught her that surprise was a luxury, awareness was survival. She turned her head slightly, enough to catch reflections in the fogged mirrors lining the wall. Cadets, 4 of them, young, broad, shouldered, fresh haircuts that still looked too neat for war. Their uniforms were half off, sleeves rolled, fatigue jackets slung over shoulders. They had wandered in laughing, careless, until they saw her. The laughter died mid-breath. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The cadets stared, confusion quickly twisting into something ugly, assumption. One of them snorted, breaking the silence. "Hey," he said, voice echoing too loudly off the tile. "Wrong showers." Another cadet chuckled, nudging his friend with an elbow. "Didn't know they let civilians wander around down here." She reached for a towel hanging on the hook beside her and wrapped it firmly around herself. The movement controlled, deliberate, no panic. No scramble. Her posture didn't change. She stood straight, shoulders squared, eyes level. "I'm aware of where I am," she said calmly. The cadets exchanged glances. Calm unnerved them more than fear would have. One stepped forward, confidence borrowed from numbers. He was taller than the others, jaw set like he had something to prove. "This is a restricted area," he said. "Female facilities are on the other side of the complex." She turned fully now, meeting his stare. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. Not the eyes of someone caught, but of someone measuring distance and intent. A faint scar traced her collarbone, visible above the towel. Another crossed her forearm, pale against weathered skin. "I said," she repeated evenly, "I know where I am." The tallest cadet scoffed. "Look, ma'am, you can't just—" "Cadet," she interrupted. The word landed with unexpected weight. He frowned. "Excuse me, you addressed me informally," she said. "That's your first mistake." A ripple of unease moved through the group. One cadet, the youngest, barely old enough to shave, shifted his stance. His gaze dropped briefly, catching something the others hadn't noticed. The faint outline of ink at her shoulder blade, partially obscured by steam and towel. Not decorative, functional. A mark earned, not chosen. "Guys," he murmured, uncertainty creeping into his voice. The tallest cadet ignored him. Emboldened, he took another step closer. "You think you're funny, walking into our showers like this." Her jaw tightened, not in fear, but restraint. "You walked into mine." A silence fell again, thicker than the steam. Water continued to roar behind her, relentless and indifferent. She studied them the way she'd studied hostile villages, briefing rooms, and dark corridors overseas. 4 cadets, no weapons, poor spacing, overconfidence masking inexperience. She could dismantle the situation a dozen ways, but she didn't need to, not yet. "What unit are you with?" another cadet asked, his tone suddenly cautious. She didn't answer. The tallest cadet opened his mouth again, but this time the words didn't come. Something in her expression, cold, steady, unyielding, pressed down on him. Authority, raw and undeniable, radiated from her without insignia or uniform. Somewhere deep in the complex, a horn sounded, marking the hour. That was when the youngest cadet swallowed hard. "Sir," he said, then corrected himself. "Ma'am." I think she stepped forward just once. The movement was small, but it shifted the balance of the room. The cadets instinctively straightened, years of conditioning overriding confusion. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice low and controlled. "You are going to turn around, you are going to leave, and you are going to remember this moment for the rest of your careers." The tallest cadet hesitated, pride warring with instinct, and instinct was losing. The realization was close now, so close it could be felt, like pressure before a storm. They didn't know who she was yet, but they were about to. No one moved. The water continued to pound the tile behind her, the sound now unnervingly loud in the silence that followed her command. Steam curled around the overhead lights, blurring edges, softening faces, but not the tension. That only sharpened. The cadets stood frozen, half-turned, unsure whether to obey or push back. Training had drilled obedience into them, but ego had a way of drowning out discipline, especially when rank wasn't visible. The tallest cadet clenched his jaw. He didn't like being told what to do, not by someone without stripes. Not by someone standing barefoot on cold concrete. "With respect," he said, stressing the word until it lost all meaning. "You don't have the authority to order us anywhere." She tilted her head slightly, studying him as if he were a problem set she'd solved long ago. "That's your second mistake," she replied. The youngest cadet shifted again. His eyes kept flicking back to her shoulder, to the faint ink beneath the steam. He had seen markings like that before, on instructors, on veterans who didn't talk about where they'd been. The realization tugged at him, slow and unsettling. "Guys," he whispered again, louder this time, "we should go. Shut up." The tall one snapped, never breaking eye contact with her. "She's bluffing." Her lips pressed into a thin line, not anger, but disappointment. "Cadet," she said, voice cutting clean through the room, "what phase are you in?" The question caught him off guard. "What? Your phase?" she repeated. "Training cycle." "Answer, phase 2, he said automatically. "And your weapons qualification score?" she asked. He hesitated. "Classified." A corner of her mouth twitched. "No, it's average, and your left shoulder dips when you fire under pressure." The room shifted. One cadet let out a quiet breath. Another frowned, suddenly uncertain. How could she know that? She turned her gaze to the second cadet. "You favor your right knee on long runs. Old injury. You hide it well, but it'll cost you if you don't correct your stride." The cadet stiffened, color draining from his face. Her eyes moved to the third. "You're the smartest one here, top of your class academically, but you hesitate when leadership falls on you." Then, finally, she looked back at the youngest. "And you," she said more gently, "are paying attention. That will keep you alive." The steam seemed to thin, though the water still ran. "How do you—" The tall cadet started, then stopped. She took a step closer, close enough now that he could see the scars clearly. Not dramatic, not theatrical, the kind that came from shrapnel, friction, heat, earned quietly. "You think authority comes from patches and pins?" she asked. "It doesn't. It comes from experience and responsibility." The tall cadet's confidence cracked, just a hairline fracture. "You still haven't told us who you are." "No," she agreed, "I haven't." She reached past him calmly and turned off the nearest shower valve. The sudden silence made everyone flinch. Water dripped from pipes, loud as a countdown. "I didn't plan to," she continued, "but since you decided to make this a lesson, we'll do it properly." All 4 cadets were standing at attention now without realizing when they'd shifted. Backs straight, Chins lifted, years of muscle memory responding to something they couldn't yet name. She adjusted the towel, secure and immovable, then squared her shoulders. Whatever modesty the steam had offered was replaced by presence. "Command presence. You entered a restricted area without confirming occupancy," she said. "You failed to assess the situation before asserting control, and you let ego override protocol." The tall cadet swallowed. "In the field," she went on, "that gets people killed." The youngest cadet nodded almost imperceptibly. A distant door opened somewhere in the corridor outside. Footsteps echoed heavy, purposeful. The cadet stiffened further, eyes darting toward the sound. She didn't look away from them. "Here's the part you're struggling with," she said quietly. "This isn't about embarrassment. It's about respect for spaces, for teammates, for command, whether you recognize it or not." The footsteps grew closer. A shadow crossed the frosted glass panel near the entrance. The tall cadet's voice was barely above a whisper now. "Ma'am, who are you?" For the first time, she allowed herself a breath. "You'll find out in about 10 seconds, she said. The door opened. A senior instructor stepped inside, stopped short, and snapped to attention so fast it looked like instinct rather than choice. "Commander," he said, sharp and clear. The word hit the room like a concussion blast. The cadets froze, and in that instant, before apologies, before consequences, before understanding fully set in, they realized just how badly they had misjudged the situation. The word commander hung in the air long after it was spoken. No one breathed. The senior instructor remained at attention, eyes forward, posture rigid with respect. The cadets stood frozen, their bodies locked by instinct, minds scrambling to catch up with reality. The tallest cadet felt his stomach drop, not like fear during training, but something colder, final. She didn't react to the title, no nod, no acknowledgement, just a slow, measured inhale as she turned slightly toward the instructor. "At ease," she said. He obeyed immediately, hands moving behind his back, but his expression remained grave. "Ma'am," he added, voice lower now, "I was not aware you were on site tonight." "I came unannounced," she replied. That was intentional. Her gaze shifted back to the cadets. They looked different now, smaller somehow, stripped of swagger. Their earlier confidence felt like a distant memory they didn't want to revisit. The tallest cadet swallowed hard. His mouth opened, then closed again. Whatever apology he'd rehearsed in his head collapsed under the weight of what he now understood. "You," she said, pointing at him. "Yes, ma'am," he snapped, voice cracking despite his effort. "State your name." He did, quickly. "Do you know why I haven't told you who I am until now?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, ma'am, because in combat," she said evenly, "rank is often invisible. Sometimes the person with the most authority looks like the least important one in the room." She turned to the others. "That lesson applies here." The youngest cadet's hands trembled slightly at his sides. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes burning with a mix of fear and shame. "You assumed," she continued, pacing slowly in front of them, "that you understood the situation because you were comfortable, because you thought you had control. That assumption almost cost you your discipline, and would cost lives in the field." No one spoke. She stopped in front of the second cadet, the one with the injured knee. "What do we say about spaces that aren't ours? Respect them." He answered immediately. "And about people we don't recognize." She pressed. "Assess before acting." He replied louder now, confidence replaced by humility. She nodded once. "Correct." Her eyes moved to the third cadet. "Leadership isn't about being loud," she said. "It's about being right when it matters. Remember that." "Yes, ma'am." Finally, she stood before the youngest cadet. His voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," She studied him for a moment longer than the others. "You noticed," she said. "You questioned. That matters." A relief flickered across his face, but only briefly. She stepped back, addressing them all now. "You will write a full incident report," she said, "not to punish yourselves, but to understand where you failed and how to fix it." The tallest cadet nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes, ma'am." The instructor shifted his weight slightly. "Commander," he said carefully, "how would you like to proceed?" She turned toward him. "They'll finish their training," she said, "but this moment stays with them. That's the consequence." She adjusted the towel once more, then reached for her uniform folded neatly on the bench nearby, laced there with intention before she'd ever stepped into the water. As she dressed, the cadets remained at attention, eyes fixed forward, hearing every rustle of fabric like punctuation to the lesson they'd just been taught. Once fully uniformed, the transformation was undeniable. Medals, insignia, the unmistakable bearing of someone who had commanded under fire. She faced them one last time. "Remember this," she said. "Strength without respect is weakness, and authority without humility is failure." "Yes, ma'am," they answered in unison. She nodded once, then turned and walked past them, boots striking the concrete with quiet finality. The cadets didn't move until the door closed behind her. Only then did the tallest one exhale. None of them would ever forget the night they mistook silence for vulnerability and learned the true weight of command.